7:47 a.m., Tuesday morning. A quiet street. Bird sprinklers and the soft hum of a perfect suburb. And then, clang. That single metallic bite of bolt cutters tearing through my chain shattered the silence like a gunshot. That was the moment Bethany Kensington Wright, president of the Willowbrook Estates Homeowners Association, stopped being a neighborhood busybody and became a federal criminal. See, while I was 8,000 miles away chasing cartel runners through the desert, this self-crowned queen of suburbia decided my vehicle didn't fit community standards. What she didn't know, that olive drab Jeep was no ordinary ride. It was a federal drug task force vehicle, loaded with over $300,000 worth of classified surveillance gear. When she sliced that lock, she didn't just steal property, she triggered a federal security alert. My name is Marcus Tank Rodriguez, U.S. Army Reserve MP and newly assigned federal agent. 3 months earlier, I thought inheriting my late grandmother's home in Willowbrook would be a blessing, a quiet place between deployments. Instead, it became ground zero for a war between military discipline and suburban tyranny. Willowbrook Estates, where every house matches the next. Every lawn edge is perfect, and every rule comes printed in 12-point Helvetica. HOA dues, $150 a month. Translation: paying someone to micromanage your life. My grandma, Rosa Rodriguez, raised me after my parents died when I was 12. She taught me respect, discipline, and one unbreakable code. Mijo, stand up to bullies, but do it the right way. She passed before she could see what her quiet little neighborhood had become. A dictatorship run by a woman with a measuring tape in one hand and a fake smile in the other. Bethany Kensington Wright, 52. Real estate broker. Drives a white Lexus SUV so polished it reflects her own self-importance. 7 years as HOA president had turned her into a suburban tyrant. Her husband Carl sat on the city council, and together they treated the community charter like a personal throne. 2 weeks into my deployment overseas, I received an email stamped, "Urgent HOA Notice. Violation, unauthorized commercial vehicle storage." My Jeep, a clearly marked government unit with federal identification decals, was labeled an eyesore. Bethany quoted Section 12B of the HOA covenants, no commercial or work vehicles in residential driveways. Here's what she didn't know: federal law, and her own community's original 1987 bylaws, exempt military and law enforcement vehicles. She wasn't enforcing rules, she was inventing them. While I was dodging bullets overseas, she was fining me $50 a day. By the time I found out, I apparently owed $2,000, and my sister Maya was crying on the phone. Maya teaches 7th grade history at the local middle school. She's the kind of person who apologizes when someone bumps into her. She had driven to Bethany's office with my deployment orders in hand, hoping reason might work. Bethany didn't even let her finish the sentence. "Rules are rules," she snapped. "If your brother can't follow community standards, maybe Willowbrook isn't right for your family." That single line lit the fuse. Maya called me that night, her voice shaking. Tank, she threatened to put a lien on Grandma's house, said she knows people at the school board who could make things difficult. That's when I realized something deeper was happening. This wasn't about grass length or parking spaces. Bethany had a pattern. The Johnsons, Marine veteran, fined for a noisy motorcycle. Sarah Martinez, Navy spouse, ticketed for unprofessional garden decorations. Every military family in Willowbrook was being targeted, and none of the so-called violations existed in the actual bylaws. Maya dug into Grandma's old paperwork and found the originals. Section 4, Paragraph C. Government, military, and emergency vehicles are exempt from appearance regulations. Bethany's entire crusade was built on fabricated documents. She counted on fear, on silence, on neighbors too polite or too tired to check the facts. It worked until she targeted my family. That night, sitting in a dusty tent under a desert sky, I remembered Grandma's words. "Stand up to bullies. Mijo, but do it the right way." I looked down at the satellite phone in my hand and made a decision that would change everything. If Bethany Wright wanted a war over a Jeep, she was about to find out what a federal counteroffensive looks like. 48 hours after that first violation notice, The war went public. A registered letter arrived at my sister Maya's doorstep. Stamped final warning. It ordered immediate removal of the unauthorized vehicle or emergency, towing within 24 hours. The words emergency and health and safety risk were sprinkled all over. The letter like confetti, the kind of fake legal language that scares honest people into submission. Maya called me again from Grandma's kitchen. I could hear the old floorboards creak beneath her feet, the same ones Grandma used to dance on when she cooked. Her voice trembled. "Tank, there's a tow truck circling the block. The driver's staring at your Jeep." That was the moment I realized this wasn't simple harassment. It was a coordinated hit. So I called JAG, the Judge Advocate General's office, military lawyers who eat constitutional violations for breakfast. I was connected to Staff Sergeant Patricia Williams, a woman whose calm voice could cut through steel. After scanning the file, her tone changed instantly. "Rodriguez, this isn't an HOA dispute. It's attempted theft of federal law enforcement property. That's a felony. See, the Service Members Civil Relief Act doesn't just protect deployed soldiers from financial scams or evictions. It makes it illegal to harass, threaten, or seize their property while they're on active duty. And that Jeep, and it didn't just belong to me. It belonged to the United States government." Williams filed a formal complaint, and within hours, Willowbrook's name landed on a federal liaison list. Bethany's suburban empire was officially on the radar, but the plot was thicker than I thought. When Maya dug deeper into Grandma's HOA archives, she found a hidden file. Meeting notes from 2019. A letter, signed by Bethany herself. It recommended that the city deny military housing programs in Willowbrook because transient military populations lower community standards. Translation: "We don't want soldiers living here." Maya's hands shook as she read it aloud. Tank. She's been keeping military families out for years. Every complaint, every fine, every intimidation letter, all part of a pattern. Bethany wasn't just drunk on power. She was running a discrimination campaign with political backing from her husband's city council seat. That's when my mission shifted. This wasn't just about saving my Jeep anymore. This was about exposing corruption disguised as community management. Maya started organizing quietly, reaching out to other targeted families, documenting everything, fake citations, threatening emails, even notes slipped under doors warning non-compliant residents to move. Without realizing it, she was building the foundation for a federal civil rights case. But Bethany wasn't done escalating. A week later, Maya's phone buzzed again. The footage she sent me made my blood run cold. Bethany was in our driveway, camera in hand, wearing heels and holding a clipboard like she was inspecting a crime scene. She photographed the Jeep from every angle, measuring distances with a tape measure. Then with that same condescending smirk, she told Maya, "Your brother's service doesn't excuse non-compliance. Maybe your family should consider a neighborhood more appropriate to your lifestyle." It was the kind of fake politeness that dripped with prejudice, but I had my own card to play. See, my Jeep wasn't just a vehicle. It was a surveillance platform. Motion sensors, GPS, encrypted comms, internal cameras. That night I logged in remotely, and what I saw made my stomach twist. Bethany had trespassed 17 times in 3 days, walking onto federal property, peering through windows and snapping photos of classified hardware. That wasn't harassment anymore. That was espionage. When my task force supervisor, Captain Sarah Chen, saw the footage, she didn't even blink. "Rodriguez, how fast do you want this woman's life to become complicated?" That's when the operation began. Suburban Warfare, Federal Edition. Knowledge note, under 18 U.S.C. Paragraph 641. Unauthorized access or photography of federal law enforcement equipment can qualify as theft or attempted espionage. The penalty? Up to 10 years in prison. Per incident. Bethany's next move came like clockwork, desperation disguised as authority. She hired a private security company called Exec Safe Patrol, giving them authorization to monitor community compliance. 2 men in a white SUV started parking outside Grandma's house, photographing the Jeep every hour like it was a bomb threat. But that wasn't all. They started whispering to neighbors that my vehicle was military-grade surveillance and that it posed a security risk. Within days, neighbors stopped waving. Some crossed the street when they saw Maya. One night she called me sobbing, "Tank, they're saying you're dangerous. That veterans bring trouble. Parents at my school are scared." Her voice cracked under the weight of lies. That's when I realized Bethany wasn't just abusing power. She was weaponizing fear. Captain Chen warned me, "If we act too soon, they'll spin it as a cover-up. Let them hang themselves," so I waited. And the waiting paid off. One night at 1:43 a.m., the Jeep's infrared sensors lit up. There she was again. Bethany, flashlight in hand, peering inside my windows, snapping photos of encrypted radios and surveillance cameras. Next to her, one of her security guards taking notes like a criminal student. They were trying to open the doors, trying to access classified systems, trying to break into federal property. My hands clenched so hard the desert sand beneath my gloves turned to grit. Maya's voice broke through my headset. "Tank. She's losing it. She's acting like she owns the place." No, I thought. She just declared war on the wrong soldier. Takeaway. Unauthorized surveillance or tampering with federal task force property isn't a local matter. It's federal espionage, a crime investigated by Homeland Security and punishable under the Patriot Act. After weeks of threats, lies, and fake authority, it was time to hit back, the right way. No shouting matches, no social media drama. This was going to be a federal counterstrike planned with surgical precision. I had two things. Bethany didn't. Patience, and a legal system that actually works when you know how to use it. While she paraded around the neighborhood like a dictator, my task force supervisor, Captain Chen, was building something bigger behind the scenes. She coordinated with the Federal Property Division, the Service Members Civil Relief Office, and a few people whose names I still can't say on record. Bethany thought she was fighting a soldier. She was about to discover she'd been fighting the United States government. The plan was simple. Let her expose herself fully, document every violation, and then pull the pin. Meanwhile, Maya became our eyes on the ground. She kept her phone recording every conversation, every threat, every security inspection the HOA tried to pull. Her courage amazed me. A soft-spoken schoolteacher turned battlefield correspondent in a war she never asked for. One afternoon, a new notice appeared taped to Grandma's door. It claimed that repeated community violations would result in property seizure through executive action. That's not even a real legal term, but it sounded terrifying enough to fool most. Homeowners. Maya ripped the paper down and called me immediately. "Tank, she's saying they can take the house. Just take it." Now, that was my breaking point. The next morning, Captain Chen filed an official federal theft of property complaint, triggering something beautiful. A multi-agency review involving the U.S. Marshals Service, Department of Defense Legal Affairs, and the Civil Rights Division. The suburban war had gone federal. Knowledge note, under Title 18, U.S. Code, Paragraph 361. Willfully damaging or attempting to seize federal property, including vehicles or surveillance equipment, carries up to 10 years in prison, or more if done during active operations. While the paperwork moved through Washington, Maya kept digging, and what she uncovered next blew everything open. In Grandma's old filing cabinet, buried beneath years of HOA newsletters, she found something. Meeting minutes from 2018 to 2021 that no one in the community had ever seen. Handwritten notes, approval stamps that didn't match official records, and at the bottom of one page, a signature that made my blood run cold. Carl Wright, city council member, Bethany's husband, had approved early rezoning recommendations for the Willowbrook area. Next to his signature, pending clearance of targeted properties. Targeted. They weren't enforcing community standards. They were clearing out families, veterans, widows, minorities, anyone who slowed their development plans. When Maya read the list out loud, I froze. Grandma's address was on it. That's when everything clicked. The HOA wasn't just corrupt. It was part of a property acquisition scheme. They created fake violations, drove families out, then sold the homes cheap to a shell company run by Carl. Organized crime, hiding behind white fences and mailbox flowers. That night, in my deployment tent, I opened my encrypted laptop and typed a message to Captain Chen. Operation HOA Burnout. Phase 1. We were going to dismantle the entire operation piece by piece. First step, documentation. We had video proof of Bethany trespassing, GPS data of her movements, and now evidence of city-level corruption. Second step, exposure. Maya coordinated a quiet meeting with the other victims. The Johnsons, the Martinezes, the Hendersons. Veterans, teachers, retirees, and all bullied into silence. Together they began drafting sworn statements. The more we uncovered, the clearer it became. Bethany's HOA wasn't a community board. It was a criminal enterprise operating under federal RICO definitions. Takeaway. When multiple people conspire through an organization, like an HOA, to commit fraud, intimidation, or financial theft, especially across state or federal lines, it qualifies as racketeering under the RICO Act, 18 U.S.C. Parvus 1962. That's not a neighborhood issue. That's organized crime. 2 nights later, Bethany tried one last intimidation stunt. She ordered her exec safeguards to confront Maya while she was loading groceries into her car. The lead guard, tall, shaved head, probably a failed cop, stepped in front of her. "Ma'am, we need to ask about your brother's vehicle. That military equipment could be a safety risk to the community." Maya started recording immediately. Her voice didn't even shake. "Are you suggesting my brother, who's serving overseas, is a threat to his own neighborhood?" The man smirked, stepped closer. "Military personnel sometimes bring home problems, PTSD, weapons, surveillance tech. We're just ensuring safety." That one sentence became federal gold, because under federal law, discriminating against service members for perceived mental health or security risks is a civil rights violation. Maya uploaded the footage to our encrypted server. Captain Chen's team forwarded it straight to the Department of Defense Inspector General. Within 48 hours, Exec Safe Patrol's federal license was suspended. The guards disappeared overnight, and Bethany? She panicked. She filed 10 emergency complaints in 3 days. To the police, the fire department, code enforcement, even animal control. Every one of them accusing our family of threatening community safety. But all she'd done was create a paper trail of obsession. The trap was set. By the end of that week, federal marshals had authorization to intervene. All we had to do was wait for Bethany to make her final fatal mistake, and she didn't disappoint, because at 6:47 a.m. on a Tuesday morning, she showed up with a tow truck and a pair of bolt cutters. 47 a.m., Tuesday morning. Sunlight filtered through mist over Willowbrook Estates. Sprinklers hissed across manicured lawns. The kind of morning that smells like peace until it didn't. Clang, clang, clang. The sound of bolt cutters biting through my steel security chain shattered that peace like gunfire. Through a live feed on Maya's phone halfway across the world. I watched the unthinkable unfold. There she was, Bethany Kensington Wright, queen of the cul-de-sac, standing in my driveway. Hair unbrushed, robe flapping, fury in her eyes, and bolt cutters in hand. She'd actually brought a tow truck, Discount Dave's Towing, an under-the-table company that didn't ask questions. Maya's voice shook through the speaker. "Tank, she's cutting your locks. She's stealing your Jeep right now." The tow driver froze when he saw the federal law enforcement vehicle decals. "Lady, this belongs to the government. I'm not touching that." But Bethany screamed back, waving her clipboard like a sword. "It's abandoned property. I'm the HOA president. I have legal authority." Her voice cracked, shrill and panicked. That single sentence, captured by Maya's security cameras, became Exhibit A in a federal theft case. Knowledge note: tampering with or attempting to remove federal law enforcement property, even without success, triggers automatic federal response under Title 18 U.S.C. Paragraph 641 and Homeland Security Alert Protocol 22. Penalties include up to 10 years in prison and terrorism enhancement if national security equipment is involved. The moment Bethany cut that lock, she didn't just break a chain. She activated a system designed to respond like a living organism. My Jeep's hidden GPS module pinged Homeland Security, FBI, and Task Force Command within 30 seconds. Every sensor on that vehicle came alive. Cameras, microphones, motion detectors, recording everything in real time. And it got worse. After the tow driver bailed, Bethany did something so stupid it was almost poetic. She locked the community gate behind her. Now, she wasn't just stealing government property, she was blocking federal access to it. "If he wants it back," she yelled at Maya, "he can follow proper HOA procedure. Military service doesn't make him above the rules." Her voice echoed through the cul-de-sac, carried on the sound of distant sirens already racing toward Willowbrook. Maya just stood there, recording everything, the Jeep half-loaded onto a flatbed, Bethany screaming orders, neighbors peeking from behind curtains. It was surreal. I could hear Maya's breathing over the satellite call. Shaky, but steady enough to hold the camera firm. She's lost it. Tank, she's actually doing it. Meanwhile, inside Homeland Security's response network, the alert was cascading like a domino chain. Unauthorized interference with federal equipment. Coordinates locked. Response units deployed. Captain Chen's team hit the ground before 8 a.m. by 9. Federal marshals were rolling through. Willowbrook's iron gates, sirens cutting. Through the fake suburban calm like thunder. The first to step out was Marshal Jennifer Torres, a woman whose reputation for catching organized criminals was the stuff of legend. She looked at the locked gate and didn't flinch. "Open this gate, ma'am. You are obstructing a federal investigation." Bethany, still gripping the keys, laughed nervously. "This is private property. You have no jurisdiction here." Marshal Torres's expression turned razor sharp. "Lady, you just said that to the United States government." "Take away, refusing lawful entry to federal. Officers investigating a government property theft is obstruction of federal justice. A felony under 18. USC Parawamis 5. You don't argue jurisdiction with marshals. You comply, or you get handcuffed." When Bethany refused again, Torres gave a nod. Bolt cutters flashed once more, this time in federal hands. The gates swung open as agents surged in. Maya's phone footage went viral within hours. Neighbors gathering. Flags waving. Veterans standing shoulder to shoulder in front of Grandma's house. Old man Tom Henderson, Vietnam vet, stood at the front line holding an American flag that had flown in Da Nang. "You want that boy's Jeep?" he said. "You will have to go through 30 of us first." The neighborhood, once ruled by fear, had finally found its voice. Mrs. Patterson, who'd lost 2 sons in the Gulf War, brewed coffee for the marshals right there in her driveway. That woman forgot what community means. She told the cameras. Well, we remember. Bethany's world was collapsing in real time. Her supporters, the same board members who used to nod in silence, now backed away from her like she was radioactive. The air was thick with something electric. Justice, defiance, maybe both. Every camera lens pointed at the same woman who had ruled this neighborhood like a queen. Now she looked small, cornered, her perfect suburban image cracked wide open. "You can't do this," she shouted as Torres approached, badge glinting in morning light. "Oh, we can," the marshal replied. "And we are." Within minutes, Bethany was in handcuffs. Carl's office was being raided downtown. And for the first time in years, Willowbrook felt free. Transition scene, but this wasn't over, not yet. Because when the evidence started pouring in, financial ledgers, fake violations, bribery attempts, the federal government realized something terrifying. This wasn't one corrupt HOA. It was a network, multiple, communities tied to the same development scam across 3 states. The suburban scandal had just gone national when the dust settled on that chaotic morning. Bethany Kensington Wright's entire empire started crumbling faster than a house built on lies. By the time I landed back stateside, there were already 3 federal agencies swarming through Willowbrook Estates, documenting every email, every false complaint, every cent of stolen community money. Maya met me at the airport, eyes red from exhaustion, but shining with a strange mix of pride and disbelief. She handed me a manila folder and whispered, "Tank, we found everything." Inside those pages were financial records, meeting minutes and bank transfers, 5 years of corruption hidden under fake beautification projects and community development funds. Every dollar stolen from homeowners had been quietly rerouted into Carl Wright's development company. But that wasn't the worst part. In the very first file, a document titled, Willowbrook Estates Redevelopment Phase 2. Listed every home slated for acquisition. Grandma's house was number 1. That's when the truth landed like a punch. This was never about my Jeep. This was a land grab. Bethany's violations were just weapons. Paper bullets aimed at anyone who stood between her husband's company and a multi-million-dollar real estate deal. Military families, retirees, single mothers. All targets because they were the least likely to fight back. It was organized, deliberate, and disgustingly legal-looking on the surface. Until now. Knowledge note. When community officials use false documents and intimidation to force property sales for profit, it crosses into fraud, racketeering, and civil rights violations under the RICO Act, 18 U.S.C., prior to 1962. That's the same law used to prosecute mob bosses. Within a week, Grandma's quiet living room had transformed into what federal agents called Command Center Alpha. Maps, legal binders, and evidence boards covered every surface. Maya sat at the dining table coordinating witness statements, while veterans from the neighborhood patrolled the streets to keep watch. Captain Chen walked in with 2 federal prosecutors, Rebecca Martinez and Alan Keene, both known for taking down organized white-collar crime rings. They looked at Maya's folders, then at each other. Rodriguez, Martinez said, flipping through pages. I've prosecuted cartel money laundering with less documentation than this. The scope was staggering. Bethany and Carl had manipulated HOA bylaws, filed false insurance claims, and laundered community funds through consulting firms that didn't even exist. Each improvement project was just a shell payment feeding back into their development company. Maya had found $184,000 in missing funds, all disguised as community maintenance, and the kicker? They'd used interstate banks to move the money, giving federal prosecutors full jurisdiction. That's when we realized what we had. Not a neighborhood feud, a full-blown federal RICO case. The room buzzed with focused chaos, printers humming, phones ringing, neighbors bringing coffee like soldiers supplying a front line. Tom Henderson, our Vietnam vet neighbor, looked around and said with a grin, "Never thought I'd see another war room. But this time it's on American soil. The difference was we weren't fighting with guns. We were fighting with truth." As the investigation deepened, Maya uncovered something personal and heartbreaking. Among Grandma's hospice records were several HOA violation letters dated during her final weeks. Threats of legal action, fines for poor lawn maintenance. They'd been harassing her while she was dying. The nurse's notes even mentioned that her blood pressure spiked every time one of those envelopes arrived. Maya's eyes filled with tears as she said, "She kept asking if they were going to take her house." She knew, Tank. She knew something was wrong. That was the moment everything turned from justice to vengeance. Not violent vengeance. Legal vengeance. We were going to finish what Grandma started, standing up to bullies. The right way. Takeaway, systematic harassment of elderly or disabled homeowners tied to financial exploitation can invoke federal elder abuse and civil rights charges, especially when it causes health deterioration or financial loss. Maya's quiet determination became something fierce. She started rallying the other residents, veterans, teachers, single parents, showing them how to file formal complaints, how to document evidence, how to reclaim their rights. She discovered an obscure clause in the HOA charter that allowed residents to recall the board with just 30% of homeowner signatures. Within 72 hours, she had 67%. The same neighbors who once whispered in fear were now lining up to sign their names. The tyrant's reign was ending. The special election took place in the same community center where Bethany had once handed out fines. This time, the tables had turned. Maya was unanimously elected interim HOA president. Her first act? Freeze every bank account and lock down all digital access pending federal investigation. It was poetic justice. The same rules Bethany used to control others were now being used to dismantle her empire. Meanwhile, federal agents followed the money trail beyond Willowbrook. It led to 2 other HOAs, both controlled by shell companies under Carl's umbrella. Together, they had collected over $3 million in compliance fees and community enhancements that never existed. That discovery triggered something bigger in the Department of Justice officially launched Operation Clean Deed, AI, multi-state investigation into HOA corruption. Networks, Bethany's face, once plastered on local real estate billboards, was now appearing on nightly news broadcasts under the headline, Suburban RICO Scandal. Federal agents raid city official's home. The footage showed her being escorted out of her Lexus in handcuffs, mascara streaking down her cheeks, shouting that she was the real victim. Her husband Carl didn't fare any better. He was caught on wiretap trying to bribe a city employee to make this go away. That one phone call added obstruction of justice to his list of charges. The trials would come later, but in that moment, standing in Grandma's kitchen surrounded by the people we'd once feared losing, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Peace. Not the kind of peace you get from silence. The kind that comes when justice finally lands. If you've ever watched someone who's been powerful for too long start to lose control, you know the look. Wide eyes, shaking hands. The voice that jumps an octave as the walls close in. That was Bethany Kensington Wright, a woman who'd ruled her cul-de-sac like a monarch, now reduced to begging, bribing, and breaking every law she'd once pretended to uphold. It started small. Anonymous notes left in Maya's mailbox. You've made a mistake. Late-night phone calls with blocked IDs. A black SUV idling at the end of the street for hours. But the real move came in daylight. Maya was loading groceries into her car when Bethany appeared. Sunglasses, perfume, and an envelope bulging with cash. $50,000, Bethany said, forcing a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Take it, dear. Move somewhere more fitting for your kind of family. Maya froze, then did what Grandma had taught us. She hit record. Are you trying to bribe me, Mrs. Wright? Bethany's tone cracked. I'm trying to help you. The military life, the attention, it's not safe here anymore. Behind a row of cars, 2 unmarked sedans were parked. Federal agents already recording. That exchange alone carried a mandatory 5-year sentence for attempted witness bribery. Bethany had officially crossed from arrogance into insanity. Knowledge note, under 18 U.S.C. Part 201B, offering money to influence or silence a federal witness is a felony carrying up to 15 years in prison. Every dollar in that envelope became evidence, but she wasn't done. The next day she sent her new lawyer, a man with slick hair and cheaper ethic, to negotiate. His pitch? Drop the complaints, and Carl's company would donate generously to a veterans charity in Grandma's name. Captain Chen didn't even blink. Congratulations, she said. You just attempted corporate bribery of federal agents. Within hours, the lawyer withdrew, citing irreconcilable differences. Bethany was burning every bridge she'd ever built. The pressure made her spiral. She began filing false police reports, claiming Maya was mentally unstable, that veterans were forming an armed militia in Willowbrook. She tried to turn the narrative, painting herself as a suburban savior under siege by violent patriots. But each false report only dug the hole deeper. The FBI traced every call, every forged signature, every anonymous tip. Then came the smear campaign. Bethany hired a PR firm, Morrison & Associates, to flood local media with hit pieces. Headlines like, Teacher linked to dangerous military operations. Federal vehicle sparks neighborhood security fears. For 2 days, her story dominated local news. But the truth moves faster when it's real. Veterans from across the state flooded the comment sections, posting evidence, documents, and video of the morning she'd cut my lock. Within 48 hours, the tide turned completely. The same reporters who'd parroted her lies were now camping outside her mansion asking, Mrs. Wright, did you really steal a federal vehicle? Takeaway. Attempting to manipulate media or fabricate security threats during an active investigation constitutes obstruction of justice and witness intimidation, both felonies under federal law. The more she fought, the more she exposed herself. She started leaving voicemails for Maya at night. You don't know who you're dealing with. People disappear when they cross the wrong families. Those threats were automatically recorded, forwarded to the FBI Domestic Terrorism Task Force. The next morning, a quiet black SUV parked across from Maya's driveway. Not stalkers this time. Federal Protective Detail. They blended in. Joggers, mailmen, dog walkers. But they were armed and watching. For the first time in months, Maya slept through the night. Meanwhile, Carl Wright's political world was collapsing. Council members resigned. Developers pulled out of contracts. And then came the leak. A city clerk, tired of covering for him, released audio from a closed-door meeting. Carl's voice arrogant and cold. These military types lower property values. We just need to pressure them out before the election. That recording hit national news faster than wildfire. 3 hours later, Carl resigned for personal reasons. By sunset, federal agents were carrying boxes out of his office. Bethany's panic hit a fever pitch. Neighbors spotted her sneaking into the community center at night, carrying stacks of papers and a gas can. Maya called me in a whisper. "Tank, she's in the backyard. She's burning something." Through the window, the glow of flames flickered against her face as she fed documents into a metal trash can. Insurance files, HOA ledgers, bank receipts. She was literally torching evidence in our yard. Captain Chen didn't even have to issue a command. 2 federal agents who'd been stationed nearby moved in silently. By the time Bethany realized she wasn't alone, they'd captured every second on camera. That night, the flames went out. So did her freedom. Knowledge note: destroying records during a federal investigation violates 18 U.S.C. Paragraph 1519. Destruction of evidence. It carries up to 20 years in prison, but even after her arrest, the ripple effects kept spreading. Morrison and Associates, the PR firm she'd hired, released a final safety study, claiming that military families brought increased domestic violence and surveillance risks. It was supposed to protect their clients. Instead, it triggered hate crime investigations across 17 states. Maya's footage became the centerpiece of congressional hearings on HOA abuse and veteran discrimination. Every major news outlet covered it. CNN, Fox, Military Times, America was watching. The Reckoning, Judgment Day. The Willowbrook Estates Community Center had never seen anything like it. Once a place for bake sales and HOA meetings, it was now packed beyond fire code. Rows of folding chairs, news cameras crowding the aisles, and veterans in full dress uniforms standing shoulder to shoulder, the smell of stale coffee mixed with nerves and justice. This was no neighborhood hearing. This was a federal reckoning. At the front of the room stood 2 tables. On one side, Bethany and Carl Wright, pale, exhausted, hiding behind lawyers who looked like they wanted to be anywhere else. On the other, Assistant U.S. Attorney Rebecca Martinez, calm and unflinching, with a mountain of evidence that could bury a small country. I stood in the back beside Maya and Captain Chen. For a moment, I could almost smell Grandma's vanilla candles, like she was still there, watching from wherever good souls go after fighting their battles. The first witness was Mrs. Patterson, 91 years old. Cane in hand, voice trembling but fierce. "I watched that woman cut his chain," she said, pointing straight at Bethany. "That was government property. I called 911 myself. I told them exactly what she did." Her testimony set the tone. Truth from the people who'd lived under tyranny. Then came the veterans, the Hendersons, the Johnsons, even the Martinezes. Each one told a story of harassment, intimidation, or humiliation, all signed by the same HOA president. Every word chipped away at Bethany's facade until there was nothing left but guilt and fear. Finally, Maya took the stand. The crowd went silent. She set her hand on the Bible, took a breath, and spoke like she was teaching one of her classes, calm, steady, and brave. For years, she made military families feel like criminals for serving their country. She didn't just break rules, she broke people. And she almost broke my grandmother before she died. The room went silent, except for the sound of quiet sobbing somewhere in the crowd. Even the court reporter paused to wipe her eyes. Then came the moment that turned a neighborhood feud into a national story. Federal prosecutor Rebecca Martinez stepped to the podium. "Ladies and gentlemen," she began, "the evidence will show that this was not a misunderstanding or an overreach of community rules. It was organized criminal conduct under the Racketeer Influenced and Corrupt Organizations Act. These defendants systematically targeted, defrauded, and intimidated American service families. And when they interfered with federal law enforcement property, they crossed a line no HOA ever should. Her voice was steady, but her words landed like hammer blows. This wasn't about grass height or Christmas lights. It was about greed, power, and the belief that no one would ever fight back. Knowledge note: the RICO Act, 18 U.S.C. per 1962, allows prosecutors to charge individuals or organizations that engage in a pattern of criminal acts, fraud, extortion, obstruction, as members of a criminal enterprise. Convictions can carry up to 20 years per count. When it was my turn to testify, I stepped forward wearing my service uniform. The camera lights were blinding, but the only face I saw was Grandma's, the woman who'd taught me to stand up to bullies the right way. Bethany Wright thought she was cutting the chain on a soldier's jeep, I said. What she actually did was interfere with a federal operation and compromise national security equipment. But her worst crime wasn't theft. It was trying to destroy the families who defend this country. I paused, letting the silence fill the room. My grandmother believed in honor, community, and courage. Everything Bethany tried to take from us, and this is how we take it back. The room erupted. Applause, tears, even cheers from veterans who'd stood silently through every hearing. The judge had to bang his gavel 3 times before order returned. But the damage was already done. The jury didn't even deliberate for a full day. Guilty, on all counts, Bethany Kensington Wright, convicted of theft of federal property, obstruction of justice, embezzlement, witness intimidation, and civil rights violations. Sentence: 8 years in federal prison with no parole. Carl Wright, guilty of fraud, conspiracy, and political corruption. Sentence: 6 years, lifetime ban from public office. When the judge read the sentences, he added a statement that echoed across the country. Your conduct represents domestic terrorism, disguised as community governance. This court will not tolerate tyranny in the name of neighborhood order. That line made headlines nationwide. Takeaway: when local officials use their authority to harass or discriminate against protected classes, such as military families, it violates both federal civil rights laws and the Constitution's Equal Protection Clause. No one is above that, not even an HOA. Outside the courthouse, the air felt lighter. Neighbors hugged each other, flags waved, news reporters jostled for sound bites. Maya stood on the steps holding Grandma's old rosary. "We did it, Tank," she whispered. "We really did it." "No," I said. "She did it." Because Grandma Rosa had started it, teaching us to stand up to bullies, but do it the right way. That night, for the first time in years, I slept without nightmares. But what happened next was even more powerful than any verdict. Because the case didn't just end a reign of corruption, it sparked a movement that would change laws nationwide. 6 months after the trial, the air in Willowbrook felt different. The lawns were still green, the houses still stood, but something deeper had changed. The silence wasn't fear anymore. It was peace. For the first time in years, the sound of kids laughing filled the streets. Flags fluttered proudly again on porches where they'd once been taken down in shame. And at the center of it all stood Grandma Rosa's cabin, rebuilt, repainted, and surrounded by neighbors planting flowers in her honor. Maya had turned it into a community space, the Rosa Foundation for Fair Housing and Veteran Families. Every week, veterans came to share stories. Single mothers learned how to protect their property rights, and lawyers volunteered to teach homeowners how to fight back, legally, peacefully, fearlessly. The motto engraved on the front gate read, "Honor, Justice, Community." 3 words Grandma had lived by. Knowledge. Note: after the Willowbrook case, Congress proposed the Homeowner Accountability and Fair Enforcement Act, mandating federal oversight of HOAs and stricter penalties for harassment, discrimination, and fraud. The Rosa Foundation's case was cited in the bill's opening remarks. One quiet evening, Maya stood in front of the new sign with Captain Chen and a few of the agents who'd worked the case. The sun dipped low behind the mountains, golden light spilling over the yard where our grandmother used to sit in her rocking chair. "She'd love this," Maya said softly. "Yeah," I replied. "She'd probably bake cookies for the whole task force." Chen laughed. but her eyes stayed locked on the flag waving above the house. "You know," she said, "I've worked federal cases for 20 years, but I've never seen a community turn pain into purpose like this." Maya smiled. "That's what Grandma taught us. You don't fight evil with hate. You outlast it with goodness." The months rolled on, and the case that began as a neighborhood feud became something far greater. Documentaries aired. Senators quoted Maya's testimony during committee hearings. Even the Department of Defense issued a new directive protecting military families from HOA discrimination nationwide. The story of Willowbrook became a symbol, proof that ordinary people, when united by truth, could dismantle corruption from the inside out. In one of the Foundation's first training sessions, a young veteran raised his hand. "Sir," he asked, "how did you keep going? When it got that bad?" I looked at the old photos on the wall, Grandma smiling with her garden gloves, the faded blue Jeep parked in the background, the chain she'd once locked so proudly. "We didn't win because we were stronger," I said. "We won because we refused to let them turn us into them. That's what real strength looks like." The room was silent. Then applause broke out, slow, deliberate, real. Later that night, I walked down to the edge of the property. The air was cold, the mountains quiet, and the stars looked the way they always did, patient, eternal. I rested my hand on the hood of that same Jeep, the lock now polished and new. On the windshield, a small sticker read, "Property of the United States and of Rosa's legacy." For a long moment, I said nothing. Then quietly, "We did it, Grandma. You can rest now." Bethany and Carl Wright both served their sentences. Their assets were liquidated to repay homeowners across 3 states. Their case remains a teaching standard in federal law academies. The Willowbrook precedent. Maya became a national advocate for property reform. She's spoken before Congress, led nonprofit programs, and inspired hundreds of communities to reclaim their rights. As for me, I retired from active duty a year later, but my mission never ended. Because justice, like service, doesn't stop when the uniform comes off. Sometimes the hardest battles are fought not overseas, but on your own street. And sometimes victory doesn't sound like an explosion. It sounds like peace. When a quiet mountain craftsman refused to sell his family's home, a ruthless HOA tried to destroy everything he stood for. But truth, courage, and unity don't bend to corruption. In the end, one family turned tragedy into a national reform, proving that even in the smallest towns, justice can roar louder than power. This is the true spirit of Willowbrook. This is the legacy of Rosa. This is what it means to fight and win the right way.